Okay, so today we're talking about the complex number system. And the complex number system, it revolves around the idea that the square root of -1 equals I. All right, what this means for you is that instead of, like we learned in our lesson about the quadratic equation, writing down or leaving something, square root of a negative number being undefined, which is what your calculator will tell you if you plug it in, or just leaving it alone because we can't do anything with it, we actually have something that we can do with this now. All right, so the square root of -4 here, we would say that it's 2i. All right, so let's take a look at some examples here so we can get a feel of how this works. So basically, we're looking at this. I have the square root of -25. This is the same as saying the square root of -1 times the square root of 25. Well, the square root of 25, we know that, that's 5, right? And then we've just learned that the square root of -1 is I. So we would say that this is 5i. All right. Looking at this one, right? Trying to trick us. You see the negative signs on the outside? What's the square root of 144? 12. And then we make it negative. Watch for them to trick you. Look at this one. I've got two negatives here. I've got one inside and outside. All right. So square root of, so the negative square root of 49 times the square root of -1. See how we didn't change it? We just split it apart. So the square root of 49 is 7. Square root of -1 is I. And then we still have this negative sign out here that was here originally. So that makes our result negative. All right, everybody following so far, I hope. This is not overall a difficult concept. You just got to pay attention. All right. Looking at this one, 7 times this negative square root of 200. All right, so let's break it apart, right? I have 7 times the square root of 200 times the square root of -1. Square root of -1 we know is I. Square root of 200. Yeah, that doesn't have one, right? So we got to break this guy down. So remember what we did? So split this guy apart. So 200 is, we can say that that's the square root of 100 times the square root of 2. Well, 100 has a square root. That's 10. So 10 is going to come out. The square root of 2 is going to stay underneath there. And then I still have the 7 that I got to deal with. So this is 7 times 10i times the square root of 2. So let's do the multiplication. So 70i square root of 2 is our answer. All right, I know that seems a little bit like a lot, but you guys are going to be fine. All right, let's move on down to the next part where we talk about what a complex number is. Okay, so besides just having an I and where we get it from, we're going to do some stuff with it. All right, a complex number is always of the form a plus bi, where a is the real part. That's the regular number that you know and love that you've been dealing with since kindergarten. And b is the imaginary part. So that's the part with the I. All right, now I want to tell you, guys, here the I does not function any differently than an X does. All right, it doesn't have any super duper magic powers. You still put I's together like you put X's together, all right? Just it's another letter of the alphabet. We have one exception to this, and I'll show you this here in a minute when we get to it. All right, so we can add and subtract complex numbers. It's a lot like collecting terms when working with variables. It's just exactly like combining like terms, guys. So I have 3 plus 5i plus 2 plus 4i. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 i's plus 4 i's gives me 9 i's. All right, same thing here. 4 plus 5 gives me 9. 1i plus 3i gives me 4 i's. All right, pay attention though if we have negative signs. All right, this negative sign here will mess you up and cause you all kinds of havoc that you do not want if you do not deal with it. Because we have a negative sign in front of parentheses, it means I need to change the sign of everything inside. It's exactly like if we were to distribute a -1. All right, so make this a positive, change the sign of everything in parentheses, then combine. All right, so 8 plus 5 is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. -3i minus 6i gives me -9i. All right, a word on handwriting here. Y'all are going to notice that I'm making my eyes with this curly little tail, right? You do not have to do this. I do this because sometimes when I'm writing, like here, the dot doesn't really show up when I've dotted my I. And it's really super important if I'm writing I's and I'm writing ones, that one doesn't end up looking like the other, okay? So the little curly tail that I write on these, so it looks kind of like a little backwards J, is just for emphasis, so that my handwriting is really clear, so that I can always tell what's an I and what's a one, or what may just be a straight line on the paper because Microsoft Word picked up the side of my handwriting instead of my pen. All right, one last thing I do want to talk about, and it's not particularly on this page, but I told you that the I's do have sort of a superpower. And it's mentioned up here, right here. It says that I squared is -1. All right. And this does make sense, because if I is equal to the square root of -1, so the square root of -1 times the square root of -1, that would just give us -1. Just like if I say the square root of x squared times the square root of x squared, what does that equal? Well, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of x squared is x. So x times x gives us x squared. You see how this works? So same way, anytime you see I squared, you can know to simplify that to -1. And that's the only superpower that the I's have, is you just remember that this I squared is -1. All right, guys, good luck on your homework. And as always, if you have any questions, be sure to send me an email.